The main character sees the face of a ferocious wolf surrounded by a blue aura, and the character's voiceover is heard saying that he cannot die in such a place. They stand face to face, the dark-haired hero clenching his teeth, holding a sword in his hands and leaning on one knee. He frowns, looks straight ahead with confidence, and loudly shouts the phrase that he will not die. A voiceover against the backdrop of a collapsing building begins to talk about the events of half a century ago. According to him, a major earthquake occurred that shocked all of humanity. This led to the emergence of dungeons all over the world. A hero with long hair and red armor stands in front of a crowd of monsters resembling ogres and beasts emerging from a portal. The voiceover at this point says that these monsters were not affected by any conventional weapons, and that the only ones who could fight them were people with supernatural strength known as mastery. The long-haired hero rushes with a sword at his opponents, cutting them down, and then sheathes the sword. The voiceover says that using skill to fight monsters helps the holders level up and become better. Such people inspire fear and respect, and are called awakened. The action moves back to modern times. The main character with a sword in his hand stands opposite a goblin with a club. He frowns and rushes at the enemy, and at this moment the character's first and last name, Tsukasa, as well as his 4th level and skill class, Imitation, are displayed on the system window. Tsukasa swings at the goblin with a scream and leaves a deep gash on the monster's chest. A system window appears on which the hero's skill is written, and that he was unable to obtain the enemy's skill. Tsukasa makes a dissatisfied sound and grits his teeth. At this moment, he looks up, sees a goblin with a club attacking him, and shouts a curse. The main character's voiceover pronounces the name of the magic technique, and a fireball appears. A blurry orange image appears before the character's eyes, similar to a whirlwind, and he again utters a curse word. Tsukasa finds himself sitting on the ground, looking at the red-haired hero, who calls the main character stupid and tells him not to waste his power on destroying a crowd of weak monsters. Magic lightning in the hand of the red-haired guy illuminates his stern face. The first and last name, Kakaru, appears on the system window, as well as his 15th level and skill class, Lord of the Flame. Kakaru clenches his hand in a fist, his red armor is visible, and the voiceover of the main character is heard, repeating the name of the red-haired guy. The main character mentally tells that Kakaru is considered the star of the next generation of awakened ones, and the reason for this is hidden in his skill. In Tsukasa's imagination, a picture appears of a wizard conjuring a blue pentagram in the air, and a swordsman with a shiny tip. The main character's voiceover explains that mastery begins to manifest itself in a separate group of people during their first appearance in the dungeons. They can change their rank and benefits as awakened ones. The action returns to reality. Tsukasa sits on the ground and looks at Kakaru. The red-haired guy tells him that it's time to become useful, stop sitting around looking stupid and start looking for magic stones. Tsukasa lowers his head with his mouth half open and agrees. The main character's voice overstates that Kakaru has the Flame Master skill, which is considered extremely powerful as it allows the owner to control fire at will. Tsukasa mentally says that there is also a skill called Imitation. At this moment, an inscription appears on the system window, revealing the abilities of this skill. Imitation allows you to use the skill of a monster with which physical contact has been established once. The main character says that this skill helps him repeat the skills of monsters, but the likelihood of success is extremely low. Tsukasa picks up the glowing blue stone. At this moment, he mentally says that his skill forces him to take risks when approaching the monster. Taking the stone, the main character looks at it with an upset face and says to himself that his skill is defective. Then 2 guys approach Tsukasa, one with freckles, the other close-shaven, both wearing armor. First and last names, level, and skill appear next to them on the system windows. The guy with freckles is called Inu Hayato. He is level 11, and his skill is Lightning Strike. The shaven hero's name is Yoshimura Riku. He is level 10, and his skill is Heroic Strength. Yoshimura Riku asks how much time Tsukasa plans to spend to clear the dungeon. Inu Hayato arrogantly remarks that the main character can't even fight, his skills are useless and he should give up. Kakaru puts his hand around the neck of the depressed Tsukasa and says that Inu Hayato doesn't need to be so rude, because everyone here is comrades. Kakaru leans towards the main character, and in a pressing voice asks him to make the most of his useless skill, while calling Tsukasa Big Brother. The main character clenches his teeth nervously. His voiceover says that the reason he became an adventurer is to treat Kisaraga's younger sister Mayu. In Tsukasa's imagination, a portrait of a sister with brown hair, red eyes, and a brown dress appears. Mentally, the hero declares that his sister is the only one left with Tsukasa. Mayu has been suffering from the disease since birth. The character then presents a vial of blue elixir and says that this medicine can cure any disease. Tsukasa begins a sentence about how he has the opportunity to get the elixir, but is interrupted. He returns to reality, to a dialogue with Yoshimura Riku and Inu Hayato. Yoshimura Riku asks what their plans are for today, and Inu Hayato hopes they won't go to the master's room. Chidu Kakeru steps on a rock and states that their destination is the monster's lair. The red-haired guy's eyes glow. He smiles cheekily and says that they should take the treasure for themselves. A powerful flame ignites in the cave. Chidu Kakeru stands in the middle of the fire in a victory pose and shouts that the goblins will taste his flames. On the system window you can see the inscription of increasing the level of Chidu Kakeru from 15 to 16. His skill is indicated below. The red-haired hero says that even if he just kills goblins, he can still level up if enough of them die. Tsukasa looks at what is happening and quietly utters a curse. He watches his comrades and mentally reasons that the only way to level up is by killing monsters, but he won't be able to defeat them alone. Continuing his thoughts, the hero says that even if he joins the party, Chidu Kakeru, and the others will kill them all, so Tsukasa will not gain any experience. The main character with an upset and gloomy face thinks that walking with his comrades is pointless if everything continues like this. The team finds the treasures, including gold, and Yoshimura Riku and Inu Hayato happily run towards the treasure, shouting cheerful sounds and looking around. Chidu Kakeru steps aside and creates magical flames. Then the wall explodes and a beautiful door with a blue stone appears. Chidu Kakeru laughs and says he is surprised by the secret room. Tsukasa's voiceover talks about the secret room and the valuable and powerful items it could be filled with, as gold, a sword, a crown, and other jewels fall in the background. The imaginary picture changes to a bloody silhouette, and Tsukasa mentally thinks that the secret rooms are full of traps, and if someone accidentally falls into them, he will die immediately. The main character returns to reality. His team is standing at the door. Yoshimura Riku asks Chidu Kakeru about traps. Chidu Kakeru says with a confident face that it's not a problem because he has a great idea. Tsukasa holds the blue stone in his hands and turns his head towards the others. At this moment, Chidu Kakeru strikes him in the cheek, and the main character groans and screams painfully, stumbles and falls to the ground. Chidu Kakeru apologizes to Tsukasa, who is shaking all over. The red-haired character then grabs the main character by the throat and says with a scary, possessed face that Tsukasa will be the first of their team to die. The main character asks what his comrade just said, looking at him with incomprehension. Yoshimura Riku asks Chidu Kakeru in confusion that the red-haired guy is going to use Tsukasa to set off traps. Inu Hayato holds a chest in his hands and says that using a comrade as a test subject is wrong. Chidu Kakeru turns to them over his shoulder, a flame in his hand. He mockingly asks if Inu Hayato is serious. The red-haired hero says that he simply found a way to get rid of a useless team member. Yoshimura Riku and Inu Hayato take Tsukasa by the arms and drag him to the door to the secret room. Chidu Kakeru kicks the main character inward and ironically thanks him for his help. Smiling hypocritically, he says that they will meet if Tsukasa can survive. The main character looks at the door closing in front of him, frowns and curses. He sits on the floor, leaning on his hands, and is angry with his comrades. A blue-white flash lights up in front of him and blinds the hero. Tsukasa opens his eyes and sees a large hall with a huge number of arches. He asks in surprise what kind of place this is. The main character looks into one arch, where a pair of blue eyes burns in the darkness. Tsukasa's pupils dilate in fear and sweat rolls down his cheek. The voiceover says that each dungeon has a rank and lists each of them, naming beginner, intermediate, advanced, heroic, and mythic, which no one has reached. At this moment, a fierce blue wolf comes out towards Tsukasa, who rushes at the main character with an open mouth and a roar. At this moment, a red inscription lights up on the system window, indicating that in front of the hero is the God-Eater Fenrir of the 80th level, whose skill is unknown. Tsukasa panics and asks if this is a joke or if he is really in a mythical rank place. The main character stands up and laughs nervously, asking rhetorically if the traps from a lower-ranking dungeon brought him here. Tsukasa clenches his fists and says that he refuses to die. The hero is transported in his thoughts to the past and stands behind his sister, crying at two coffins. Tears flow down her cheeks, her face expresses pain, and at this moment the protagonist's voiceover says that Mayu was the only one left with him. Tsukasa returns to reality, raises his sword and shouts that he refuses to die in the dungeon in the name of his sister. With a jerk, the hero rushes at the wolf and jumps in the air, loudly scolding the monster. A ferocious wolf roar is heard, sending Tsukasa flying with sound waves. The hero flies to the side, trying to grab something with his hand. At this moment, the wolf's roar turns into a blue flash with circles extending from it. Tsukasa crashes into a wall, which cracks from the impact, bleeding from the hero's head. At this moment, an inscription about the mastery status and information that it was not possible to obtain the enemy's skill pops up on the system window. Tsukasa sits with his head down and spits out blood. For a moment, his vision goes dark, and he mentally asks if this is really the end. However, the next second he sees a wolf approaching him, raising his paw with a wild roar. The hero says the phrase that today he will not die, and gets up from the floor. The image of his sister appears again in his imagination, and Tsukasa mentally apologizes to her for being pathetic. The main character's face shows blood flowing from his forehead. An unknown voice orders Fenrir to sit. The ground under Tsukasa cracks. He watches in surprise as the wolf falls to the ground. The next second, a voice calls Fenrir a good boy. A woman comes in wearing heels and a long red dress. She is an elf with white hair. The girl says that she would be grateful to Tsukasa if he would be gentler with the wolf. The hero sees a beautiful elf with a mole near her eye. She calls Fenrir an important guest. The girl throws her hair back and greets Tsukasa. She says that he is in her castle. The hero raises his head to the woman and asks who she is. The elf folds her hands, standing in front of him, and looks down imperiously, smiling in surprise. The girl says that Tsukasa is in better shape than she expected, but she believes that in this state she still cannot carry out any of her plans. The elf interrupts, extends her hand to the protagonist's face. He looks at her in surprise and asks what it is. The heroine leans towards Tsukasa's face and says in her ear that this is a gift from her. Then a large pink pentagram appears underneath them. The hero's body is pierced by magical power, and the girl's voice asks Tsukasa to be grateful. At this moment, a message appears on the system window stating that the previous mastery status has been changed from imitation to imitator. The next system window says that the hero has received a large amount of mana, and the level will increase instantly. The voiceover of Tsukasa asks in surprise whether he has moved to a new level, and whether his skills have developed. At the same time, it is noticeable on the system window that the hero's level has changed from 5 to 25. A voiceover asks what happened. The elf slyly looks at the hero with red eyes and leaves, bowing, asking for forgiveness. Tsukasa throws himself at her feet and asks her to stop and explain what happened. The girl smiles slyly and tells him to use his new power to defeat his opponent. She predicts that one day Tsukasa will do this, and then says that he will be able to leave the mythical dungeon and calls the character a stunt. The heroine raises her finger and disappears in the dark smoke, leaving the exhausted character alone, leaning on the sword. The wolf then appears again with a wild roar, and Tsukasa says that he will never be able to defeat this monster. The wolf swings its claws and jerks at the main character, who defends himself with a sword. Red sparks are visible. A message appears on the system window stating that the Copycat skill has been activated. The hero jumps back, while the system window shows that the enemy's skill of the Devourer of Gods Fenrir has been obtained. Tsukasa rhetorically asks how he should fight the wolf. He looks at the monster and raises his sword. The hero is suddenly surprised and gasps. An inscription appears again on the system window stating that the Fenrir skill has been obtained. Tsukasa questions whether he really gained the wolf skill. The next system window says that the mastery status is celestial power, and its effect is that the user's body is enveloped in the power of the gods, while maximizing the physical abilities of the owner, and this power lasts for 1 minute. Taking a confident pose, the hero reflects that if he uses this skill, he will be able to win. He is tense, thinking that the effect will only last 1 minute, so he will have to carefully choose the moment to use the skill. With powerful leaps, Tsukasa strikes at the ferocious wolf. At this moment he thinks that his body feels very light, and his reaction is faster because the level has increased. The hero flies back, sliding along the ground, and mentally pronounces the phrase that he is surprised at receiving Fenrir's mastery. The system pop-up window talks about the effect of imitation mastery, which is a low chance of gaining the enemy's skill. In this case, the acquired skills disappear after the first use. The condition is also stated to establish physical contact with the enemy. The hero reasons to himself that the new Copycat skill is pretty crazy. The next system window says that the Copycat skill has the effect of gaining 100% of the opponent's skill, and it does not disappear after use. In addition to the previous condition, it is necessary to either make contact or experience the enemy's skill firsthand. Tsukasa muses that being confident in receiving someone else's skill just by touching is great, but he doesn't know what it's like to experience the skill firsthand. The wolf becomes even more ferocious. A red aura appears around him. Tsukasa shields his face with his hand. He screams as an unknown force passes through his body. The system window shows that the mastery changes to the power of the divine wolf, and its effect limits the owner's mobility. Tsukasa clutches his throat, breathes heavily, and says that he cannot breathe. He asks what it is. A message appears on the system window stating that the enemy's skill has been acquired. The next system window provides a description of the skill. The hero must use the presence of the silver wolf to intimidate opponents. The effect is to slow down the enemy and lasts for 10 seconds, but this duration varies depending on the difference in the levels of the fighters. Tsukasa removes his hand from his throat and says that he will get it now, that to experience means to feel the skill in practice, and that it makes him cry. The hero sees in horror how metamorphoses occur with the wolf, and the inscription Vanargand appears. A huge dark flash throws the hero aside, leaving huge dark red stripes in place of the wolf. Tsukasa says that he will not survive if such power hits him. The wolf screams, opening his mouth, and the hero strikes him with a sword. Tsukasa reasons that even with a 100% chance of success in obtaining the skill, the hero would die if he tried to benefit. A system window appears. It says that his skill has changed to heavenly power. The effect is to strengthen his physical abilities to the limit, and the duration is 1 minute. The hero begins to think that he will succeed with this skill, but is interrupted. He frowns and shouts that he will either do what he has planned or die. A blue aura appears around Tsukasa. The system window indicates that the heavenly power mastery has been activated. A huge red wave throws the wolf aside. A system window appears in which it says that the Vanargand mastery skill has been acquired. Tsukasa emerges from the blue haze. His eyes shine with a blue sparkle. The system window says that there are 60 seconds left until the mastery ends. The hero raises a sword with a blue aura at the blade. Tsukasa kicks off the ground and then delivers a crushing blow, shouting the phrase that it is time for reckoning. Enormous power hits the wolf's face. The inscription on the system window changes. 50 seconds remain until the end of the skill. The hero strikes, while saying that he feels overwhelmed by the power of heavenly power. With it he can win. With a powerful kick from Kisaragi, Tsukasa drives the wolf's body into the ground. The message on the pop-up window changes, and there are 30 seconds left until the action ends. The hero thinks that he has half a minute left, then counts down 20 seconds. A blue flash appears between the wolf and the character. Tsukasa says that he needs to defeat Fenrir before the action ends. The wolf and the hero look at each other, and the character shouts that he will beat the monster to a pulp using the power of Vanargand. Wolf and Tsukasa collide in the final fight. A powerful wave passes along the ground. The hero jumps to the side and says that it is impossible to reach Fenrir from such a distance due to the difference in levels. The hero shouts that in this case he will just hit him directly and swings his sword. A huge dark force bursts out of the wolf's mouth. Tsukasa sees a sparkle in the animal's mouth and screams in horror that his plan won't work. The wolf's enormous power bursts out and throws the character away. The hero frowns, then a huge fiery veil covers everything. The character escapes from the flames and falls on top of the wolf with a sword in his hands. The wolf tries to strike again, but the character sharply pierces him with his power, shouting that the monster will not succeed. The animal squirms in horror in the blood. Tsukasa jumps on Fenrir's face and deprives him of his eyes. The hero raises his sword and says that he will finish this right now, but he is abruptly interrupted by an unfamiliar voice asking him to stop. Tsukasa slows down. A message pops up on the system window saying that the Copycat skill has been activated, and then another window says that the skill has been acquired. The elf appears again and says that the hero did a great job and it was a pleasure to watch a wonderful performance. The heroine deflects her finger, and then utters a phrase that the battle is nearing the end and they need to drink some tea. The girl climbs onto the wolf, who calms down and lies down on the ground. Tsukasa stands opposite her and asks why she did this. The girl thoughtfully straightens her hair and assumes that she needed it to kill time. In the heroine's imagination, a picture appears where she is sitting on a throne inside the palace, and her voiceover says that adventurers never come here. Even if someone manages to sneak in, Fenrir immediately kills them. The heroine admits that she did not expect to meet someone like the main character. Tsukasa holds his injured shoulder. The girl comes up to him and asks him to listen to her request, and the hero asks her again. The elf explains that she would like to get acquainted with the outside world, while the girl takes the character's chin with her hand. The heroine says that the outside world consists of a huge number of particles, so she cannot explore it freely, and cooperation with Tsukasa is important to her. The main character agrees. The elf removes her hand in surprise, makes a sweet face, and says that she did not expect a quick answer. In the character's mind, scenes of a recent battle with a wolf appear, and Tsukasa's voiceover says that he has a presentiment of a lot of unknowns and cannot trust his new acquaintance. However, he internally thanks the girl for the fact that such a weakling like him was able to resist the wolf. The hero thinks that helping the elf will only be beneficial. Tsukasa wipes the blood from her face and sums up the heroine's words that she wants to see the outside world. He asks how exactly she is going to get there, but does not finish the sentence, but falls exhausted into the girl's chest. She gently strokes his head and says that the hero has used up too much energy, so she doesn't blame him. Tsukasa turns his head and asks the girl's name. He sees the beautiful face of the elf, who says her name is Loki, and loses consciousness. Loki's voiceover says he's looking forward to working with him. The action moves to the hospital. The main character lies on his bed and looks at the ceiling, thinking that he is unfamiliar to the character. An unfamiliar heroine sits on a chair nearby, calling Tsukasa a sleepyhead and noticing that he has finally woken up. The hero sits up in the hospital bed and asks who she is. The girl exhales irritably and says displeasedly that the character has already forgotten her. A little girl who resembles Loki appears in front of him. She smiles and jokingly says that Tsukasa is heartless. The hero looks at the girl and asks if she is Loki. The girl dangles her legs and says that you can abandon the honorific and just call her by her name. She approaches the main character and says that she finally has a chance to have fun in the outside world. But Tsukasa has been in the hospital all this time, and she has become bored with it. The girl sits on the hero's waist and asks to make amends, but the hero asks her to get off. Tsukasa asks her what happened after fainting. The heroine sighs and says that she took his body with her, and then they teleported to the initial rank dungeon. The character is interested in how he got to the hospital. A bored girl leans her head on her hand and asks about the hospital, understanding that this is the name of the current place. With the help of magic, Loki attracts the apple, at this moment reasoning that she left Tsukasa's unconscious body in the place where they teleported. Thus, the adventurer passing by must have found the hero, which means that he was brought by the one who found Tsukasa. The hero asks why the girl has not yet teleported to the outside world if she can do it. Loki reveals that she is a goddess who requires a large amount of mana to maintain her true form. Since there is very little mana in the real world, she can only appear in the form of a child. The girl says that in this form she would not be able to travel freely. Tsukasa muses that Loki would have been taken by the police if she had been moving around as a child in the outside world. The girl hits the hero on the forehead and scolds him. Tsukasa asks why Loki helped him. The elf holds an apple with magic and says that she needs cooperation, but she did not reveal the role of the hero in her destiny. Smiling slyly, the girl said that she would tell about it later. Loki stands up and turns his back to the hero, who asks where she is going. The girl declares that she is educated enough not to interfere with the hero's family at such a time, and says goodbye to him, and then disappears like smoke. The next second, Kisaragi's sister Tsukasa enters the room and addresses him, and then throws herself on his neck. She reproaches him for the fact that the hero spent a week in a coma, and tells how the doctor assumed that the hero would not wake up at all. Tsukasa pats Mayu on the head and says that he did not suspect that he had been in a coma for such a long time. He apologizes to his sister for disturbing him. The girl clutches the bed with her hands. She is glad that her brother has woken up, and honestly admits that she cannot stand it if he leaves her. Tsukasa smiles and says that he is not going to go anywhere and that besides her, he no longer has a family. Mayu agrees with tears of happiness and puts her hands to her chest. She says that it is time for her to go and advises her brother to rest, and the hero asks Mayu not to overexert herself. The girl winks at Tsukasa and says not to worry as she has been feeling better lately. The door slams shut and the hero exhales, saying that Mayu is as restless as ever. Loki appears from the smoke and asks if it was Kisaragi's sister Tsukasa. He agrees, says his sister's name and adds that she is the only one left with him. In the hero's imagination, pictures of the past emerge, where Mayu is coughing up blood. The voiceover of Tsukasa says that her sister has been sick since birth, and there is no cure. This is the reason why he goes down into the dungeons, because he wants to find a cure for all diseases. The hero grabs his chest and imagines a magic flask with an elixir. Tsukasa apologizes for telling Loki this. The girl with a stern look says that even a cure for all diseases cannot cure Mayu's illness. The hero, in horror, asks her what this means. The girl argues that the reason for this condition may be the curse of the dungeon. The elf turns away from the hero and clarifies that casting curses is a skill. She sits down on a chair and continues her speech about how she doesn't know who could cast such a curse, but it is clearly the work of a mythical being of the same rank as Loki. Tsukasa asks again that if this is a skill, by destroying God, the curse will subside. The girl confirms his words. The hero addresses the elf by name and declares that he wants to deal with the god who cursed Maya and cure her. He asks a new friend for help. The girl thinks about it and agrees to Tsukasa's proposal, because she is also interested in who cursed the hero's sister. The character thanks Loki. The girl says that she needs to go down to the dungeons every day to train, because Tsukasa needs more experience before challenging a mythical rank dungeon. The hero admits that he needs to go to school, but Loki does not know what it is. The character's voiceover tells about the Tenjutsu Academy, where only awakened people study. This is a school for those who are going to become adventurers. Tsukasa concludes that Loki and he will be a team from now on. The girl hits the hero's fist and agrees, admitting that she is impressed by the cooperation with the hero. The action moves 3 days later to the Dungeon Management Organization in Japan. The worker tells the main character and Loki that she cannot allow them to go down into the dungeon alone. She asks to take the difference in levels into account, with Tsukasa noting that he suspected such a problem. The woman says that when working independently, it is safer to fight monsters that are at a lower level because the adventurers will be on an equal footing with opponents of the same level. If the heroes encounter monsters of a higher level, the danger increases. The worker warns that Tsukasa is at level 4, and level 5 monsters appear in the initial dungeon. She understands that the difference in levels is small, but the rules must be followed. Loki says that this is rude and offers to deal with the woman, but the hero asks not to say such things. He also mentions that they agreed not to show Tsukasa's real card. His last name and first name are written on it, and level 25 is also indicated. The hero's voiceover says that he last entered dungeons with level 4 and the imitation skill, and this data is stored by the Dungeon Management Organization in Japan. If they find out that the hero suddenly gained level 25 and a new skill, he will have problems. Loki asks if Tsukasa is too tolerant or downright lazy. Tsukasa says he doesn't want to make a scene and asks to leave. However, the girl says that it is too early to leave and grins slyly. She suggests using the wordplay skill. Tsukasa thinks about it and decides to use his abilities, although they are prohibited here. The hero again asks if it is possible to go down into the dungeon alone, and a system window appears stating that the character has used the pun skill. The employee agrees and asks for the card. Loki confidently convinces Tsukasa that no one will know about this since it is the skill of the gods. Tsukasa admits that he underestimated the girl, and that he feels disrespected by her. The action moves to the dungeon. The heroes exit the door into a long corridor with a portal at the end. The voiceover says that such gates move to any dimension and allow you to freely visit any place. Tsukasa scans the card. The system voice says that it has been successfully activated and warns to be careful when the gate opens. Entering the portal, the hero mentally reasons that it does not matter to him which dungeons to conquer or which monsters to kill if it will help lift the curse from his sister. He declares that he is even ready to kill God. Tsukasa and Loki enter the portal. The hero confidently moves through the flow of blue magic. The system window warns that they are on the first floor in the goblin's lair. Loki asks what exactly they are going to do in the dungeon. Tsukasa says he wants to see how far he can go. A goblin with a curved sword in his hands comes out to meet the heroes. The system window warns that he is at level 5. Tsukasa unsheathes his sword and says it's time to start testing the weapon's durability on monsters. The system window shows the hero's first and last name, his 25th level, as well as the skill of the imitator. The hero rushes at the goblin. He strikes with ease, and a fountain of blood is visible. The goblin falls to the ground with his death rattles. Loki looks at Tsukasa with displeasure and asks if he is satisfied with this. She notes that in the character's current form, such opponents do not pose a serious threat. Tsukasa asks the girl to let him be happy and leans towards the blue crystal, picking it up. He says this is the first time he has defeated a goblin on his own. Loki says that defeating the goblins is natural, since the hero is at level 25. Pictures of their first meeting with Loki pop up in the hero's imagination, and his voiceover says that the reason for the rapid increase in level was the mana donated by the girl. Thanks to his new strength, the hero is able to easily destroy goblins that he could not defeat before. Tsukasa thanks the girl, and she happily replies that such help was an easy matter for her. She slyly asks the hero what's next. Tsukasa states that they must continue moving forward. He goes deep into the dungeon and says that their goal is to reach the boss room. A system window appears warning that the heroes are on the 5th floor in the goblin's lair. Tsukasa descends the stairs into the darkness. Loki exhales and blithely admits that she's bored. Tsukasa asks if she expected something different. The girl points her finger at the hero's cheek and says that she was waiting for an amazing battle that would make the blood boil in his veins. She floats in the air with magic and states that most of the monsters they have encountered are not even adversaries and that this is a serious problem. Loki draws Tsukasa's attention to the fact that the goblin leaders have appeared, and the main character sees a crowd of monsters. One of the heroes concludes that, since the number of enemies is growing, the owner's room must be somewhere nearby. With a sharp jerk, Tsukasa cuts off the head of one of the goblins and declares that the first move brings victory. He then cuts down the entire crowd of monsters and says that even with a large number of opponents he can easily cope in this form. The hero admits that he was afraid of not being able to cope with them, but it turned out to be a very easy task. With a wild roar, a new crowd of goblins rushes at the character. Tsukasa fearlessly faces approaching enemies. He raises his sword, surrounded by a blue aura, and Loki watches in fear. She screams at him to stop the hero. Tsukasa shouts out the name of the Vanargan Mastery and delivers a powerful blow that cuts the surface of the cave. The hero rejoices and begins to talk about the simplicity of the mission, when suddenly severe pain pierces him and he falls. Loki shouts that this is why she asked him to stop. She warns that this is the price for using divine techniques in a weak human body. Tsukasa admits that he has never encountered anything like this before. The girl explains that last time he used heavenly power. The hero clarifies that he cannot use Fenrir's skill without heavenly power. Loki confirms his words and says that he forbids the use of heavenly power and the rest of the skills he acquired from Fenrir. 2 system windows appear indicating that the sealed skills are not available. Tsukasa frowns in horror. Loki says that he creates this obstacle so that the hero does not rely too much on a powerful ability, since this power will be needed later and must be saved. The girl laughs, and Tsukasa smiles with a wounded smile and says that he hates deceivers. The action moves to the orange gate. Loki remarks that this is too unusual an entrance for a goblin. The heroine's voiceover explains that the Goblin King is the final boss in the lair of goblins, and his summoning subordinate skill allows him to endlessly summon new monsters. The battle with the Goblin King is a test to see if the awakened one has the necessary skills. The hero agrees, and the gates open slightly. The characters enter the throne room, where a goblin sits at the very end. Loki remarks that he feels confident for a simple monster. The Goblin King, fat, in furs, grins. Tsukasa takes his sword out of its sheath and wonders why the monster is not afraid of him. The enemy rises from the throne and a system window appears warning that this is a level 15 Goblin King. The hero declares that he is not at all afraid of the monster. A darkness forms under the enemy's feet, from which a crowd of goblins slowly emerges. Tsukasa says that compared to Fenrir, the Goblin King is weak and that he can handle it on his own. The voiceover says to fan the flames of anger and rage. The Goblin King's body is covered with magical stripes. The system window warns that opponents have gone berserk. The hero shouts to Loki in surprise, asking what she is doing, since she influenced the monsters. Loki smiles slyly and says that this is her test for Tsukasa, and asks her to do her best. The hero smiles and says that the girl is a real Spartan god. A crowd of goblins rushes at the character, but he confidently runs at them with a sword. Loki watches the fight from the side with a calm face. Mentally, she reasons that if the hero cannot cope with these monsters without using heavenly power, then his candidacy should not be considered. Tsukasa fights among a crowd of goblins in the very center. He strikes them with blows of his sword, and they die wheezing. The hero kills several monsters at once with one blow. However, he reasons that he cannot continue to hit them individually due to the frenzy Loki casts. The Goblin King lets out a wild roar and is covered in a purple aura. The main character looks at him and reasons that the goblins keep coming in droves because of the monster's unique skill. The Goblin King hits his subjects with purple magic. Tsukasa continues to fight and says that since the Goblin King gained the rampage status, the enemies have the same attacks. Tsukasa swings his arms and mentally concludes that if he does not defeat the Goblin King, then he will have to fight in an obviously losing battle. In this case, he needs to seal the monster's skill so that it does not cause trouble. Tsukasa extends his hand with the accumulated blue magic and orders the goblin not to use his skill anymore. A message appears on the system window stating that the pun skill has been activated. Magic blue chains bind the body of the Goblin King, who tries to escape with a wild roar. He clenches his hand into a fist, trying to break the chains. With a sharp movement, the monster frees himself. He rushes at the main character, who is at a loss, and delivers a powerful blow. Tsukasa defends himself with his sword, staring intensely at the goblin. The opponent throws him back with force. The main character leans on the sword and rhetorically asks what is happening. Loki says that it was a good idea and that it would have worked if she hadn't given the monster a rampage status. The girl smiles slyly and ironically addresses the main character. He asks if this means that the Goblin King's skill cannot be sealed. The monster calls out a new crowd of goblins with a cry. Loki says that the enemy Tsukasa is going to challenge is a god, so the hero must find a way out so that the advantage is on his side. The main character mentally reflects that the one who sent the curse on Maya is the owner of the mythical dungeon, like Loki. If the hero's limit in battle is what it is now, then he will never be able to save his sister. Tsukasa rises again and Loki asks if he can still fight. The hero confidently confirms her words and looks intensely at his enemies, uttering the phrase an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. A sharp whirlwind of blue magic cuts through the crowd of monsters. Tsukasa rushes into another pile of goblins and charges at the Goblin King with an enraged face. The monster screams in tension and creates a barrier of purple magic. The hero notices with a smile that the goblin used the power of summoning subordinates. Tsukasa shouts that he will take the enemy's skill for himself, while standing in a pathetic pose. Messages appear on system windows indicating that the Copycat skill has been activated, and that the target's skill has been successfully copied. The main character extends his hand forward and shouts for the monsters to come out. The system window warns that summoning subordinates is activated. A large circle with bright blue flashes forms in front of Tsukasa, and he smiles and says that he is interested in what will happen. Someone's roar is sharply heard. The main character looks in surprise as a small blue wolf cub appears from the circle. Tsukasa asks if this is serious. The wolf cub barks happily. He turns to the main character and gently caresses his knee, purring quietly. Loki bursts out laughing, and the main character displeasedly calls her a girl and clenches his teeth. Tsukasa awkwardly looks at the wolf cub, leans towards him and mentally asks if this is the same Fenrir with whom he fought in the mythical rank dungeon. The hero says that although the beast is small, he can notice the resemblance to the monster he fought earlier. The wolf cub stands next to Tsukasa, watching the approaching crowd of goblins. The animal rushes towards its opponents with a powerful leap, barking as it does so. It deals massive damage to the goblins, causing them to fly apart. Tsukasa watches in surprise as his new pet fights. The wolf cub happily waves its tail and looks at its owner. The main character strokes his head, and the beast happily sticks out his tongue and closes his eyes. Tsukasa asks him if he will fight on the character's side. The wolf cub barks approvingly and caresses the hero's hand. The Goblin King lets out a loud cry. The main character tells the wolf cub that he is leaving these monsters to him, and the animal howls for a long time. The hero and pet push off the ground with a sharp push. Little Fenrir jumps onto the crowd of opponents. Tsukasa also attacks the goblins and says that he is no longer alone. The ferocious Goblin King swings his club at the protagonist in a frenzy. He unleashes his powerful blow, but Tsukasa manages to hold it back with his sword. The hero screams in rage, frowning, and with a sharp jerk repels the goblin's blow. He sees the monster approaching him, aims at his legs and strikes directly at them. The enemy falls to the ground with his face distorted with anger. A roar escapes from his mouth, his eyes become bloodshot. A small wolf cub, surrounded by a blue aura, emerges from the crowd of monsters with a relaxed and victorious look. The main character exhales and stands in front of the fallen monster. Pointing the tip of his sword at the goblin, he gathers his strength and rushes at the enemy, striking him directly in the face. He summons Fenrir, who rushes at the monster from above and hits him with a powerful blow. Tsukasa rushes at the goblin again and also deals damage from above, plunging his sword into the goblin's skull while shouting that this is the end. The monster lets out a long scream in agony. The dust from the battle clears. The hero sheaths his sword. Loki appears behind him with Fenrir at his side. She claps her hands and says that using the summoning of subordinates against the Goblin King was a smart move. The main character holds a crystal in his hands, smiling. The girl adds that he shouldn't be proud just because he defeated an entry-rank dungeon owner. The hero says that he understands what she is talking about and closes his eyes. He thinks about how it was only a starting rank, but he managed to clear it alone, and now he will try even harder until he achieves his goal one day. Tsukasa looks at the dark blue crystal in his hands and with a smile tells Mayu to wait a little, and then he will save her. Loki looks at the little wolf cub and asks Tsukasa what he will name his pet. The hero looks thoughtfully at the animal and says that he will call it Lufin. The wolf cub's face shines with happiness, and he again rubs against the legs of the main character. Mentally, the hero notices that he simply played on the name Fenrir. He pats the wolf cub on the head and says that it is time to finish and sell the magic stones obtained in the battle to buy delicious food for Mayu. The girl runs after the leaving hero and says that she wants to eat something sweet, and Lufin goes after them, who barks. In the dungeon management organization in Japan, a worker asks the main character about clearing the dungeon alone. The protagonist places the magic stones in front of the woman and says that these are proof of his victory, and that he wants to exchange the crystals for cash. The woman in surprise asks him to wait while she exchanges the stones for money, while in her mind she thinks about how the hero got into the dungeon alone with level 4. Tsukasa embarrassedly notices that this question seemed to be written on the worker's face. Having received the money, the main character stretches and says that it is time to return. He passes a crowd of people and through them he sees Tadu Kakeru, Yashinura Riku, and Inu Hayato, as well as the girl opposite them. They are all dressed in casual clothes. Tadu Kakeru asks the girl if he would like to join their team, and addresses her by the name Hoshigen Rin. Tsukasa thinks about the girl and says that she was the first to awaken. Hoshigen Rin throws aside her blonde hair, gathered in a braid, and looks sternly at the guys. She apologizes and says, looking bored, that she's not interested. The guys look at her in surprise and ask her what it means. Tsukasa chuckles quietly and says that Hoshigen Rin's words were quite rude. The girl notices the hero, Tadu Kakeru, and his team turn to the main character in surprise. Tsukasa turns around in confusion and surprise as the boys shout his name. Hoshigen Rin asks the hero to stop as he leaves, and Tsukasa greets her. He says that he did not expect to meet the girl here. She replies that she expected to see him. Hoshigen Rin says that she came to the dungeon management organization in Japan specifically to see Tsukasa. The girl with a joyful look says that an administrator she knew called her and said that there was an awakened one who ended up alone in the dungeon, being at level 4. She ironically remarks that Tsukasa must know who she is talking about and slyly leans towards him. The hero's voiceover talks about Hoshigen Rin. She studies in the same class as the main character and Tadu Kakeru and is the best among the students at Tenjutsu Academy, a school for the awakened. Thanks to the girl's attractive appearance, she achieved recognition from the media. Comments say that she is a shocking recruit to the top Bloodshed Guild and that a new rising star will make her debut. In the hero's imagination, a picture emerges of Rin Hoshigen giving an interview with an interested look. In his mind, Tsukasa says that he is not worthy of such a girl. The action is transferred to reality. Tsukasa wonders how Hoshigen Rin knew about what happened in the dungeon. Loki notes that the receptionist probably told her everything after the pun mastery ended. The hero begins to reflect that it was a mistake to gain access to the dungeon through mastery. Hoshigen Rin offers to show the card to the hero if he cannot explain everything in words. The girl smiles slyly and asks if there is something there that Tsukasa cannot show her. The main character is embarrassed and slightly deviates to the side. Hoshigen Rin persistently asks what he is waiting for and if he is hiding something. Loki says that Tsukasa easily allowed her to seduce him, to which he embarrassedly tries to say that it will not be possible to seduce him. But he interrupts and covers his mouth with his hand. Hoshigen Rin looks at him in surprise with confusion in her eyes. Tsukasa waves his head tensely and says that he will just show her the card. He begins to take it out of his pocket when he is abruptly interrupted by Tadu Kakeru. The girl and the main character turn to him. Tadu Kakeru ironically remarks that they have not seen each other for a long time. Yashinura Riku and Inu Hayato appear behind the guy. Tsukasa frowns and says Tadu Kakeru's name. The red-haired guy grins slyly and says that he heard about his safe return from the dungeon, and then adds that he is glad to see him again. Inu Hayato repeats the words of Tadu Kakeru, and Yashinura Riku states that he expected nothing less from a member of their team. Tsukasa grits his teeth as Hoshigen Rin looks at him thoughtfully. Tadu Kakeru again turns to the girl with a request to join their team. He claims that they will be the strongest team in all of Japan. Hoshigen Rin turns to Tsukasa and asks to see his card right now. Tadu Kakeru looks in surprise at the girl who ignored him. The main character nervously holds out the Hoshigen Rin card. She carefully studies what is written on it. The girl sees that level 15 is indicated. The girl says that even though she had a bad feeling, she sees that the card really belongs to Tsukasa. She praises him for doing it alone and says that's pretty impressive. Kakeru and his team look at Tsukasa in surprise and ask if he cleared the dungeon alone, and if it was a joke. Hoshigen Rin says that the main character has raised his level, so it is not surprising that he managed to defeat the dungeon master. Tsukasa mentally rejoices that he managed to hide the information on the fake card and takes it back. At this moment, Loki's voice in his head asks if he is grateful to her. Hoshigen Rin thoughtfully raises her hand to her face and says that it is difficult to cope with the dungeon at a low level and that she did not know about Tsukasa's talents. The hero smiles nervously and mentally thanks Loki. Kakeru sharply shouts that the hero is lying. He states that Tsukasa couldn't handle the dungeon alone because he is a failure with useless skill. He brazenly asks the main character if he cheated and offers to tell the truth. Hoshigen Rin asks Kakeru if he is serious about talking to them now. She claims that it is impossible to forge the card and waves her hand away, shooing away the surprise Kakeru. Hoshigen Rin asks Tsukasa that since he went to the dungeon alone, is he free? The girl offers to create a group with her and work together in the dungeon. Tsukasa and Kakeru are shocked. They unanimously ask if the heroine is joking. Kakeru asks in surprise why Hoshigen Rin chooses Tsukasa and not him, and asks the girl not to fall for lies, since the main character has nothing to go down to the dungeon alone. Kakeru shouts that he has nothing against Hoshigen Rin and again asks to join his team. He tries to convince the girl that together they can cope with an intermediate rank dungeon. Hoshigen Rin sharply asks why the guy still hasn't finished talking to her. She is convinced that Tsukasa handled the dungeon on his own, and she does not trust Kakeru because he and his friends are always frivolous. Hoshigen Rin leans lightly on Tsukasa and states with a cheerful face that she never liked people like Kakeru. Kakeru and his team look at her in surprise. Hoshigen Rin adds with a serious face that she knows about everything Kakeru has done. The heroine's imagination flashes to scenes from the dungeon, where the team pushed Tsukasa into a secret room to activate traps. Kakeru grabs the main character by the collar, insults him and asks if he is going to complain about the guy to someone. Tsukasa thinks that he could come up with an excuse, but it is too burdensome. He ponders what he should do in such a situation. Kakeru rushes at the hero with his fists and shouts that he will not leave just like that. Tsukasa, with a slight movement of his hand, knocks the guy's palm to the side and pushes him away with force. Kakeru gets excited and uses fire magic, shouting that Tsukasa is trying to make him look stupid. In anger, Kakeru creates a whirlwind of magic. The main character asks him to stop. Kakeru tells him to shut up and strikes him with magical blows. Hoshigen Rin intervenes sharply, pushing away Kakeru's blow. The main character and the red-haired guy look at her in surprise. Hoshigen Rin asks Kakeru if he understands what he is doing, because the skill is prohibited from being used outside of dungeons. Kakeru begins to defend himself, saying that it is Tsukasa's fault because he lies shamelessly. Hoshigen Rin covers her face with her hand and says that she is unpleasantly surprised. She asks how Kakeru can say such things with his head held high. The girl grabs Tsukasa's hand and leads him away, leaving Kakeru and his team behind. The surprised protagonist asks where they are going. Kakeru gets angry and clenches his fists while saying Tsukasa's name and then says that he will expose him. He shouts in rage that Hoshigen Rin belongs to him, Kakeru, and his eyes fill with anger, and swollen veins are noticeable on his neck. The action is transferred to the dungeon of the initial rank, the Kobold Settlement, which is notified by the system window. Tsukasa and Hoshigen Rin stand in the middle of the battlefield opposite creatures in armor, with swords and shields. The voiceover explains that the Kobold Settlement is an entry-level dungeon with a recommended level of 15. The hero followed Hoshigen Rin here because she asked him to, but he doesn't understand what she wants to achieve with this. The girl hums something with a carefree look, and the main character asks her if she really wants to fight monsters alone. Hoshigen Rin states that this is not a problem for her and asks to just watch how she fights. 3 kobolds rush at the girl with swords and screams. Rin's Hoshigen pushes off the ground and crushes monsters with quick, graceful movements. Tsukasa is surprised by her abilities. Loki's voice in his head focuses on the girl's sword, and Tsukasa asks the girl if she knows anything about this weapon. The beautiful Hoshigen Rin sword is surrounded by a golden aura. Loki tries to say something about the sword, but is interrupted by the voice of Hoshigen Rin, who says that it is Tsukasa's turn to fight the creatures. 1 kobold is already running towards him. Tsukasa gets into a fighting position while Hoshigen Rin asks to show what he can do. Tsukasa lunges forward and raises his sword, but the kobold easily parries the blow, and the hero steps back in surprise. The monster jumps from above, raising his weapon. Tsukasa jumps to avoid the kobold's sword. Hoshigen Rin asks him not to let his guard down, as these monsters are much smarter than goblins. The girl says that there are 2 ways to destroy an enemy with a shield, and the hero must either break through the shield with force or make a feint attack to slip past. The main character follows the advice and easily cuts off the kobold's head. Hoshigen Rin smiles as she thinks that Tsukasa is doing a lot better than she suspected and that she might actually invite him to the team. The girl praises the main character and claps her hands. Tsukasa thanks her and sheathes her sword. Hoshigen Rin says that since the hero is showing success, she will entrust him with the most important matter. She asks to perform the test in front of the owner's room and talks about the monster, calling him a mini-master, while she winks at the main character. They find themselves on the battlefield, where they can see a forest and huge rocks resembling dragon teeth. A warning appears on the system window that a level 15 kobold general is in front of them. The characters see a huge beast-like creature in armor and with a sword, and behind him there is a crowd of enemies. The girl says that it is necessary to start by destroying the monster's associates, and the main character agrees with her. He strikes at the kobolds along with Hoshigen Rin. Suddenly the kobold general himself swings at them, and the heroes jump away from the weapon. A new crowd of kobolds concentrates around the main monster, and Tsukasa says that there is no point in killing his comrades. The girl notices the hero's intelligence and wonders what to do Kakeru would do in such a situation. Tsukasa suggests that he would deal with the smaller kobolds and then jump on the main creature. Hoshigen Rin confirms his words and asks him to put the plan into action. Heroes quickly destroy a crowd of enemies with 2 lightning bolts. In the heat of battle, Tsukasa asks if the Hoshigen Guild has any objections to her raiding dungeons with the protagonist. The girl delivers crushing blows and replies that everything is fine as she plans to leave the guild. The hero looks at her in surprise, but Hoshigen Rin asks her to leave talking for a while after the battle. She rushes towards the kobold general and hits the shield. Behind her is the figure of the protagonist, rushing to attack. He deftly hits the enemy in the stomach, inflicting a wound, and the monster growls. Tsukasa calls his assistant, and she asks to continue the attack, saying that she will finish off the monster. A new crowd of kobolds jumps from above, protecting the kobold general. The characters jump away from them and look at the new crowd of creatures. The girl gets angry and stomps her feet, saying that they were already close. She screams in rage that working with to do Kakeru was not enough. Tsukasa turns to her questioningly. Hoshigen Rin is annoyed and beats the kobolds, repeating the words of the red-haired guy about joining the team, taking out her anger on the monsters. The girl, while fighting, shouts that she will never join to do Kakeru's team and would rather fight alone. An aura of rage forms around the girl. The confused protagonist asks if Hoshigen Rin really wants to leave her guild. Mentally, he reasons that the girl would not have left the largest bloodshed guild just like that. Hoshigen Rin confirms her intention and Tsukasa looks at her in surprise. The girl frowns and says that, despite the advantages, there is much more hassle. For example, stress accumulates. She admits that thinking about the guild makes her angry and that she fights monsters to take it out. The girl raises her hand up and indicates that her skill lies in a wide range of attacks. It becomes slightly weaker against individual opponents. Hoshigen Rin, surrounded by a whirlwind of golden light, asks the stars to hear her and the rains to fall. A large cluster of golden sparks in the sky falls on the crowd of monsters, and the spell Tir Na Nog is cast, which in Irish folklore is a mythical realm, an otherworldly paradise. The main character shields himself from the shock wave and understands what the strength of the best adventurers is. In his mind, he reasons that even if the girl sometimes becomes less weak, she is still incredibly strong. The battlefield transforms. The precious blue stones obtained in the battle are scattered on the ground, and Hoshigen Rin stretches in a relaxed manner. She says that it's like she was reborn and that only the final boss remains, and now she needs to take a short break. Hoshigen Rin and Tsukasa sit on a rock and take a break. The girl hands the character a bottle of water and asks if he has ever heard of the great hero. Tsukasa asks if he was the first adventurer to clear a heroic rank dungeon in Japan. He thinks about a name, and Hoshigen Rin suggests that that hero's name was Michinaga Dejiro, but this is his old name. She adds that after his marriage he began to be called Hoshigen and gave the girl a sword. However, grandfather also told Hoshigen Rin various stories about the dangerous journeys that Hoshigen made with his companions. In the heroine's imagination, images of 5 adventurers appear. The girl says that they explored uncharted lands, not limited by anyone or anything, and adds that she also wants to experience this. Hoshigen Rin dreamily raises her head towards him, and Tsukasa looks at her with inspiration. Hoshigen Rin says that this desire is the reason why she wants to create her own guild in the near future. The girl looks at the main character and asks him to lend her his power when the time comes. Tsukasa is embarrassed and agrees if the heroine does not mind his presence on the team. The girl rises and says that the time for talking is over and that it is time to continue on to the owner's lair. They find themselves in a dungeon near the gate and say that they have finally arrived. However, Tsukasa asks to wait as someone is standing at the gate. They see Kakaru and his team in armor. The red-haired guy says that he was waiting for Hoshigen Rin. He addresses Tsukasa with an arrogant expression and insults him, calling him untalented. The main character looks at Kakaru with anger and contempt. Hoshigen Rin ironically states what a coincidence it is to meet Kakaru in the same dungeon. She asks what his team is doing here. With a proud look, the guy reports that they are here to help an irreplaceable comrade. In his mind, Tsukasa notices that Kakaru is talking nonsense. Hoshigen Rin thoughtfully repeats the words of the red-haired guy. With a smirk, Kakaru again says that they are here to save their reckless friend, and remarks that he borrowed his father's equipment. Hoshigen Rin asks if they will attack the boss later, since that is their main priority. The voiceover says that there is an unofficial right according to which the adventurer who gets to the monster first has the right to fight the boss. Kakaru with an angry look says that he will show the real intentions and the characters will see for themselves, and orders them to just watch. Hoshigen Rin says that there is nothing else to do in this situation, just see how they cope. Tsukasa agrees and says that they will fight the boss next time. The action moves to a dark room, where Loki sits in front of the TV. She observes the behavior of Kakaru and his team on behalf of Tsukasa. Her face changes to an angry one, and the girl shouts that Kakaru and his comrades will not dare to kill the monster. At this moment, the system window warns that in front of them is a level 20 Kobold King. The creature resembles a huge wolf in armor. The voiceover says that this monster is the boss of the Kobold settlement and has the skill of summoning subordinates, just like the goblin. A crowd of servants appears next to the monster, and a thunder sword appears in the boss's hand. Kakaru and his team begin the battle. They use magic and hit the kobolds with swords. The voiceover says that Kakaru and his comrades are strong and can kill the boss. A flash of fire injures the main kobold. Kakaru turns to Hoshigen Rin and Tsukasa in the background of the explosion and utters the words that such is his power. Loki's voiceover tells the Kobold King to be a mad tyrant who will destroy everything in his path. The main character looks at what is happening in surprise as he hears the girl's voice, and Kakaru asks with an arrogant look what happened. The Kobold King goes berserk and a system window appears warning that the monster is now level 20 and that it has gained the insanity status. Kakaru rains down fireballs on the approaching creature, but this does not help. The monster accumulates a red aura around itself and hits Kakaru, who flies into the wall. Hoshigen Rin asks in horror what is happening. The main character mentally speculates about what Loki is up to. The heroine responds with a voice in his head that she punishes those who interfere with Tsukasa. Kakaru lies on the ground and trembles when the shadow of a monster appears in front of him. The Kobold King raises his sword and prepares to strike. Kakaru helplessly asks him to leave. The monster hits with a sword, but Hoshigen Rin rushes to protect his comrade, while shouting that the kobold has enormous strength. The sparks of the struggling swords are visible. Hoshigen Rin asks if everything is okay. Loki's inner voice says that the situation looks bad. Tsukasa rushes at the monster and hits it in the face with a strong blow. The hero asks Hoshigen Rin to take Kakaru and leave because it is dangerous, and says that he can handle it himself. Kakaru shouts that Tsukasa will not cope. At that moment the monster lets out a sound wave with a roar. Hoshigen Rin takes the wounded man away with his team and says that he trusts the main character, but asks him not to overdo it and not do anything stupid. Tsukasa summons Roof, and the wolf cub appears surrounded by a blue aura. Kakaru asks in surprise what it is, and Hoshigen Rin looks at the main character with admiration and calls the pet cute. The wolf cub rushes at the roaring monster. Tsukasa runs behind him, who entrusts the kobold to Rufa. The wolf cub barks and agrees. Tsukasa and the king of kobolds clash. The monster pushes the character away. He slides along the ground, pushes off and delivers a powerful blow to the kobold. The enemy sprays blood, which makes him furious. Tsukasa wonders if he succeeded in imitating the Thunder Sword. A system window appears indicating that the copying of the Thunder Sword skill has been successfully completed. Another system window says that there is an effect that causes lightning to envelop the weapon. The main character says that this should help. A red discharge covers his body as his comrades watch him in surprise. Tsukasa summons Roof, who deals a powerful blow to the enemy, but he summons a new crowd of servants. The main character says that the strength is still lacking. He raises his hand up. Blue lightning comes from the sword, and he says a phrase about making lightning thunder. The system window warns that the Thunder Sword skill has been activated. The hero's voiceover says that in addition to enhancing weapons, mastery has another effect. The system window says that lightning can be used for ranged attacks and stun the enemy. Tsukasa crushes lightning on the monster. The hero rushes to the kobold and plunges the sword into the very chest, saying that this is how he will end the monster. Blue lightning spreads through the kobold king's body, destroying him. Hoshigan Rin looks at what is happening in surprise. The main character ends up with a blue gem in his hands. The girl looks at him in shock and praises him for the work he has done, wondering who he really is. The action moves to Tsukasa's room. Loki eats an apple and with a satisfied face asks if the hero will really go to the academy, because it would be better if he cleared the dungeon. Tsukasa puts on his jacket and says that this is why he will go to school, so he can learn more about dungeons and maybe learn how to heal Mayu. Loki, with a bored look, remarks that it is enough for him to simply go to dungeons to become stronger, but then agrees, because a lot of interesting things happen at the academy too. Tsukasa asks her if she will return, and the girl says that she will definitely do so. The action moves to Tengetsu Academy, to Class 2A. When Tsukasa enters the office, he sees the faces of his classmates whispering about him. The guys discuss among themselves whether the main character should have been considered dead and how long Tsukasa is going to be an adventurer if he was almost expelled. The main character mentally notes that many already consider him dead and that the reason for this is to do Kakeru. Hoshigan Rin enters the classroom and approaches the main character's desk. She greets him and thanks him for yesterday. Tsukasa says it was a valuable experience. The heroine declares that next time they should visit an intermediate-level dungeon called the Abode of the Dead, because this is how the hero will learn all his strength. Mentally, Tsukasa says that Hoshigan Rin may suspect something and that she shouldn't openly use her skills in front of the girl. The hero's classmates ask in bewilderment why Hoshigan Rin hangs out with lagging students. The girl asks the hero if he has free time after class. At this moment, To-Do Kakeru enters the office. He frowns and heads towards the main character. He asks why Hoshigan Rin is here. The girl disapprovingly remarks that To-Do Kakeru is nothing like talking to Tsukasa like that. There is a flash of anger between the heroes. The main character mentally argues that this conflict situation does not escalate into a skirmish. To-Do Kakeru challenges the main character to battle and says that he will reveal the whole truth about him in this battle. Tsukasa inwardly asks why this is happening, and at this moment Loki, who is watching everything, laughs. To-Do Kakeru asks if Tsukasa captured the dungeon alone and did not escape. Tsukasa wants to object, but Loki's voice in his head orders him to accept the challenge. Tsukasa mentally disagrees with her because he doesn't want to stand out even more. Loki playfully remarks that he just wants to kill time, so he needs to fight, and adds that not only To-Do Kakeru should fight, but also his entire team. She notices that To-Do Kakeru got in the way last time in the dungeon, so she needs to show who's in charge. The main character thinks that a repetition of such a situation will be unpleasant, and it is better to clarify everything right away. The character stands up and declares that he is ready to fight. Hoshigan Rin looks at him in surprise. Tsukasa calls To-Do Kakeru's entire team to a fight and warns him not to complain after losing. Veins appear on To-Do Kakeru's forehead. He gets angry and shouts about how the main character dares to say such things. Loki says that there is nothing interesting in an ordinary fight and that it is worth adding details. Tsukasa agrees, thinks about it and decides to announce that if he wins, To-Do Kakeru will have to resign from the Hoshigan Rin Guild and approve the creation of a new dungeon management organization in Japan. The hero adds that To-Do Kakeru's father is the director, so there is nothing complicated about it. Tsukasa also states that To-Do Kakeru should not interfere with the aspirations of Hoshigan Rin. The girl looks at the character in confusion and surprise. To-Do Kakeru screams that the hero is completely arrogant and angrily declares that he will kill him. The action moves to the school's training ground. The heroes stand opposite each other with swords in their hands. Tsukasa announces the conditions and says that the first one to fall will lose. To-Do Kakeru agrees and confidently declares that the main character will lose anyway. Tsukasa raises his sword as smoke rises around him. Kakeru attacks him with a fire sphere. The main character dodges the blow. On the other side, Yoshimura Riku jumps at him, but Tsukasa jumps away, and the enemy's sword hits the ground, splitting it. Riku Yoshimura tries to throw a kick, shouting that the hero will not dodge, but Tsukasa blocks the damage with his hands. Hayato shouts out a pathetic phrase and directs a purple cloud of magic at the hero. Tsukasa deflects the blow with his sword. Kakeru again rushes at the character with the words that he will not leave even ashes from him. The red-haired guy creates a firestorm. Hoshigen Rin shouts to the main character to be careful. Kakeru states that a loser is always a loser and that Tsukasa will regret this battle in his next life, and watches the battle with a smile. Tsukasa emerges unharmed from the flames and states that he is not dead. The system window reports that the Copycat mastery has been activated. The following system windows indicate that the heroic strength skill has also been activated, and also that the lightning strike power has been copied. Loki, with a happy face, states that it was a failed attempt to use the flame. Tsukasa says that if it weren't for the difference in levels, he would have died. Loki encourages him and tells him not to dare die. Tsukasa stands up and mentally notes that the girl may not speak pretentious speeches. The main character turns to Kakeru so that they finish quickly. The guy calls Tsukasa Kisaragi a loser. He throws his hand forward and tells the main character not to be arrogant. Flame balls fly towards the main character, but he cuts them with his sword. The audience shouts in surprise that Tsukasa may not be a loser after all. Hoshigen Rin smiles and thinks that there is nothing surprising. She does not doubt the strength of Tsukasa. The hero lunges forward and asks Kakeru if this is all he is capable of. Kakeru enraged and declares that he will kill his opponent anyway. The main character notices that the guy is only capable of words, and Kakeru counters with the phrase that Tsukasa is too confident in his victory after defeating Yoshimura Riku. The hero says not to talk nonsense and come up. Hayato rushes at him. He shouts out the phrase that Tsukasa is a loser. Bypassing the purple stream of Hayato's magic, the main character reaches the enemy and touches him, saying that he will remember all this. A message appears on the system window stating that the lightning strike skill has been activated, and Hayato is struck by an electrical discharge. The defeated opponent remains lying on the ground. The hero moves towards Kakeru and says that he is left alone. Kakeru thinks that Tsukasa managed to copy Hayato's skill through imitation, but such an attack is unreliable and one-time use. He concludes that Tsukasa was simply lucky. Kakeru reminds the main character of the difference in skill with a grin. Loki laughs because the red-haired boy is convinced that he can win. Tsukasa muses that he wants to hide the fact that his skill has improved, and that unlike a copycat, a copied skill only works once. For this reason, the main character cannot use the skill again. The main character begins to think that because of Kakeru's attitude towards him in the past, he must destroy his entire team. Kakeru self-confidently tells the hero not to be proud of the victory over his comrades. Tsukasa notices that the red-haired guy is only talking again, and that he should just give up if he's afraid. Kakeru grins and says that the main character has a loose tongue, but he will tame it. Kakeru throws sword strikes, which Tsukasa blocks. The main character looks in surprise at Kakeru's violent movements. He manages to repel a huge stream of fire. Hoshigen Rin looks at what is happening in horror and screams, fearing for the main character. Kakeru rejoices, but the smoke clears and Tsukasa comes out. He notices that the opponent made the same move last time and it did not help, and makes a caustic remark that it is worth learning. Kakeru looks at the main character in bewilderment, but he says that the enemy missed. The red-haired guy protests that he was aiming point blank and that it was impossible to dodge. Tsukasa states that the flames created did not belong to Kakeru, but were the skill of the protagonist. Kakeru is horrified and says that the main character copied his skills and does not understand the situation, since Tsukasa has never done something like this before. The main character declares that it is time to end this. He runs up, fighting off all the fireballs that fly at him. The hero swings at Kakeru. The enemy tries to resist, but Tsukasa ends up behind the guy. He throws a powerful punch, but Kakeru recoils in anger. A sharp voice orders the guy not to move. Kakeru stands paralyzed by the force. Shrouded in fire, the protagonist approaches the enemy, who notices the flames in horror. Mentally, Kakeru asks if Tsukasa copied Kisaragi's technique again. He asks the main character to stop. Tsukasa tells him to calm down as he won't beat him to death. With one click, the protagonist raises flames around Kakeru. He touches the ground, and Tsukasa triumphantly declares that he has won. Kakeru can't believe he lost to a loser. The voice of the main character orders the guy to keep his promise. Kakeru falls to the ground. The action is postponed a couple of days after the battle. The voiceover says that, by order of Kakeru's father, Hoshigen Rin was able to calmly leave the Bloodshed Guild. Hoshigen Rin and the main character created a guild together. The heroes talk to each other. The girl says that they can go, since the formalities are over. Tsukasa asks her where she is going. She replies that she is in the dungeon. The hero wonders if it will be entry level. The girl plays with her hair and declares that now it will go to the abode of the dead of the intermediate level. She asks the hero for his opinion if this dungeon is suitable for them. Tsukasa agrees, and the girl's face shines victoriously. The voiceover says that the recommended level for the abode of the dead is 25, and that the appearing dead will interfere. The action moves to a foggy area where the heroes stand between the graves. The main character mentally notes that he needs to be more careful. Hoshigen Rin asks why Tsukasa is so gloomy. He embarrassedly declares that nothing happened and that he simply considers it necessary to be as vigilant as possible. The hero calls Roof. A wolf cub appears from the blue pentagram. Hoshigen Rin looks at him in delight. Tsukasa pats the wolf on the head and asks him to try harder. Hoshigen Rin notices that the animal is cute and joyful. She reaches out her hands to the animal. Tsukasa invites the girl to hold the wolf cub. Hoshigen Rin's face shines with happiness. She takes the wolf cub in her arms and hugs her, saying how adorable the animal is. The pet breaks out and barks, and Tsukasa mentally apologizes to him. Hoshigen Rin asks to tell about the animal. Tsukasa calls its name and says that he summons it using the minion skill. The girl reasons that this is a useful skill. She asks where the main character copied this skill. Loki remarks that Hoshigen Rin is quite perceptive for a human and that she has noticed changes in the protagonist's skill. Tsukasa nervously thinks about how to lie to the girl. He draws out his words thoughtfully. But Rin Hoshigen states that he doesn't have to answer if he doesn't want to. She adds that it is not customary to ask about skill. The girl pets the wolf cub and says that she is counting on the animal and the main character. She winks and asks to cover her in case of danger. The hero with a beaming face says to trust him and Rufa. Hoshigen Rin chuckles and says that maybe the heroes won't have to do anything. A crowd of skeletons with weapons comes towards the characters. A system window appears warning that these are level 23 undead soldiers. The girl orders to cover her as she plans to attack herself. The hero asks if they should be more careful in this place. The girl raises her sword and declares that there is nothing wrong. Hoshigen Rin takes off and rushes towards the crowd of monsters, instantly cutting them apart. Cracks of light pass through the skeletons and they shatter into pieces. Loki says that the girl has a holy sword that easily affects the dead. But the danger still exists. The dead rise from the earth. The main character rushes with his pet at the monsters. Tsukasa hits opponents with strong blows. Hoshigen Rin, the main character, and the wolf cub stand among a crowd of skeletons. The main character says that the girl has gone too far, to which the heroine just laughs and thanks him. She asks a rhetorical question about whether they can handle the monsters. The hero cuts one of the skeletons, but magic comes out of the stone on his chest, which helps the monster immediately restore its shape. Tsukasa nervously notes that there is no end to the creatures. Loki asks about what the characters are doing. Hoshigen Rin, with a cheerful face, notices that the main character is having a hard time in this battle and offers to help so that he does not get tired. Tsukasa asks the girl if she will use the skill. The girl giggles and refutes the hero's assumption. She says that she will use the sword. Hoshigen Rin moves his hand with the sword to the side and says that he will show the full power of the holy sword. The girl raises the blade in front of her and closes her eyes, turning to the sword so that it shines. A sharp flash illuminates the battlefield. The main character sees how the monsters turn into blue stones falling to the ground. He is surprised by the power of the heroine's sword. The girl explains that it's all about the light that is reflected from the blade, and this is something like a residual phenomenon.